Welcome back to Somali Nexus, the space where we reconnect with the stories that shaped us, inspired us, and too often slipped through the cracks of mainstream history. Today, we open a chapter that many never knew existed, yet it belongs to all of us. We're exploring a time when Somalia was more than a name on a map. It was a thriving hub of trade, culture, and influence stretching across continents. Long before modern borders and colonial narratives, Somali ports and merchants were key players in global exchange. Our ancestors traded with ancient Egypt, supplying prized resins and rare goods that were central to ritual and royalty. They stood firm against Persia, remembered in classical accounts as the proud Macrobians who could not be subdued. And they reached as far as China, where diplomatic exchanges and exotic gifts symbolized respect between distant civilizations. Yet somewhere along the way, this legacy faded from common memory. Textbooks glossed over it, and narratives from outside the region reshaped how the world viewed the Horn of Africa. But here, in this conversation, we restore perspective. We slow down, we listen, we rediscover. So, settle in, whether you're on a commute, relaxing at home, or sharing this moment with friends. Together, we'll uncover why Somalia's role as a global superpower was forgotten, and why remembering it matters now more than ever. If you enjoy this journey, don't forget to follow, share the episode, and leave a voice note or comment. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and helps our community grow. When most people talk about ancient power in Northeast Africa, the historical narrative is pretty rigid.
Oh, absolutely. The spotlight always swings towards pharaonic Egypt.
Exactly, the pyramids. Or maybe the gold of South Arabia, or the huge stone buildings of the Aksumite Empire.
Right?
And the Somali Peninsula, that huge strategic horn jutting out into the sea, it almost always gets treated like a footnote.
Just a distant supplier of incense or something. Not a real center of power in its own right. It's a result of what historians call diffusionist models.
And what does that mean exactly?
It's this kind of outdated idea that all the important stuff, civilization, technology, wealth, all had to be imported from places like the Nile Valley or the Near East.
So it treats the Horn of Africa as just a passive receiver, a periphery.
Precisely. And that traditional story just completely obscures the incredible agency that the indigenous populations there had for millennia.
And that is exactly why we're here today. This deep dive is going to fundamentally rethink that whole view.
We're pulling from some amazing new evidence.
Yeah, cutting-edge stuff from genetics, archaeology, and of course, the classical texts to prove that ancient Somalis were actually dynamic commercial and cultural centers that helped shape the entire Afro-Eurasian world.
We're digging for those surprising nuggets, the little details that show these populations, whether you call them the people of Punt, or the Macrobians, or the Barbaroi merchants, they were key players, innovators.
They weren't just reacting to trade.
Not at all. They were driving it. They were, in a very real sense, the maritime sovereigns of the Horn.
Okay, so let's start where history begins, with the people themselves. If those old diffusionist models said the populations were, basically imported.
Yeah.
What does the latest genomic data tell us?
The genomic data has. Well, it's provided a really definitive counterargument. It shows that the history of the Horn is rooted in a much older indigenous demographic base.
Okay.
Scientists have identified a distinct Ethio-Somali genetic component that is, for the most part, overwhelmingly confined to that region.
Wait, let's unpack that a little. What does an Ethio-Somali genetic component mean for someone just listening?
It means that if you trace their ancestry back like tens of thousands of years, a huge portion of it comes from a deep, long-standing population that settled and stayed right there. We call it an autochthonous ancestral layer.
So they were there first, and they stayed.
Exactly. Sure, external gene flow happened later from the Near East back to Africa migrations, but that was layered on top of this stable local ancestry. It wasn't a replacement. These people developed their own social path right there in situ.
That immediately establishes a foundation of indigenous sovereignty. And that foundation, that population base, it links so well to the linguistic shifts, right? We're talking about the Omotana hypothesis.
Yes. The Omotana hypothesis traces the Ur-Heimat, so the original homeland of the Proto-Sam speakers, were the ancestors of modern Somalis, to the area between the Omo and Tana rivers,
which is further south.
right? So the question becomes, how did they expand from that relatively contained area to dominate the much wider, much more arid Somali peninsula?
That sounds like a huge ecological challenge.
It was. And the answer is a crucial technological shift that happened in the first millennium BCE, the adoption and really the refinement of camel pastoralism.
A camel.
Before the camel, those vast arid rangelands were, well, they were largely unsuitable for reliable large-scale pastoralism.
So, the camel wasn't just a convenient pack animal for trade,
Not at all.
it was a total ecological game changer that basically defined their entire civil.
Absolutely. The camel gave them reliable mobility, gave them sustenance in these really water-scarce environments. And this innovation didn't just help their population expand, it also made reliable long-distance caravan trade possible. It connected the deep interior to the coast.
And we can actually see evidence of this deep pastoral civilization in the rock art at Lascaux. The paintings there are incredible. What did they show?
Oh, Las Gael is phenomenal. You have these vivid polychrome paintings that are just remarkably well preserved. And while they show humans, the central motif is always these elaborate long-horned cattle.
And they're not just regular cattle, are they?
No, they're highly stylized, adorned with decorative elements, often with these elongated necks. It suggests they were incredibly important symbolically.
It sounds like more than just livestock. It sounds like a deep-rooted cattle cult.
Precisely. The recurrence of that specific iconography, the ceremonial, almost sacred treatment of cattle, it gives us a thread of deep cultural continuity. It links that prehistoric society to historical descriptions of powerful cattle-wealthy pastoralists thousands of years later. It shows their worldview is just remarkably resilient.
Okay, so that sets the Indigenous foundation. Now, let's move forward in time to maybe the most legendary puzzle in ancient geography, the Land of Punt.
Wow. Yes.
This place drove historians crazy for centuries. People placed it everywhere from Yemen to Sudan. But the debate was finally settled by science. And it of the most surprising artifacts I've ever heard of.
It really does. The breakthrough came from the isotopic analysis of mummified baboons.
Baboons? Wait a second, mummified monkeys. How did they solve a geographic puzzle that baffled people for generations?
It's incredible detective work. See, baboons were a high-status trade good that Egypt imported from Punt. Scientists analyzed the strontium and oxygen isotope ratios in their teeth and bones.
And those act like a chemical signature.
A geological signature. Exactly. It matches the chemical makeup of the water and soil where the baboon grew up.
So the baboons literally carried the GPS coordinates of their homeland inside their bodies?
Essentially, yes. And that chemical signature was a perfect match for modern baboon populations and the soil composition found in modern Eritrea and northern Somalia, specifically the Ras Hafun area, which we know from later Greek texts as the port of Opon.
So that pins Punt right on the western Red Sea and Gulf of Aden coast.
Firmly, exactly where we find the ancestors of the Somali people.
Which confirms that this region was the irreplaceable source for the world's most valuable commodities, myrrh, frankincense.
And the relationship with Egypt was clearly one of equals. You see it in the famous reliefs from Queen Hatshepsut's expedition around 1493 BCE.
Right at Deir el-Bahri.
Yeah. The temple walls there don't show subjugated people. They show the Puntik rulers, Parahu and his wife Ati, and their stilted houses. Egypt treated them as respected sovereign counterparts. They had to. Egypt couldn't get those vital ritual goods anywhere else.
Okay, let's jump forward 1,000 years. The Greeks start encountering the same coercial peoples, but now they're calling them the Macrobians.
Right? Herodotus describes them. Tall, handsome, long-lived people.
And the stories about the Macrobians, they really speak to this idea of political agency and sovereignty, don't they?
The Macrobian account is just a perfect testament to their fierce independence. Kuranes tells this amazing story where the Persian king Cambyses sends envoys with all.
These luxurious gifts basically hoping to get them to submit to become a tributary state.
Exactly. And the Macrobian king has this brilliant response. He hands the Persian envoys an unstrung bow and challenges them to spring it when they can't. He tells Cambyses that the Persians should only think about invading when they can string a Macrobian bow. And until then, they should just be grateful the Macrobians don't want their land.
That's such a powerful narrative of confidence of a polity that is completely unwilling to be dominated. And we're actually digging up archaeological evidence to back up these stories of wealthy elites.
Aren't we? The interior of Somaliland is marked by these extensive cairn fields, huge monumental burial sites.
Right?
And these sites support the idea of powerful pastoral elites, people who had the wealth and the manpower to invest in status display, which just reinforces those descriptions from Herodotus.
This brings us to the height of their commercial power, which is so beautifully captured in the 1st century CE in the Greek navigational manual, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea.
The Periplus, it's basically a 1st century sailor's guide, and it reveals that the Somali coast, which it calls Barbaria, or the far side, was anything but a wild frontier. It was a sophisticated commercial chain of specialized ports.
Give us some examples of that specialization.
Well, you have Avalites, which we think is modern Zela, known specifically for ivory and spices. Then there's Malau, or Berbera, specializing in myrrh and frankincense. But the central hub, it seems, was Mouslan, probably near modern Bosaso.
And Mouslan was the critical link to global trade.
Absolutely. The Periplus highlights it as the chief port for cinnamon, and it specifically notes that this port needed the largest ships. That implies an enormous volume of high-value cargo was moving through there, directly linking Africa to the Indian Ocean trade routes.
The archaeology from coastal sites like Ras Hafun shows this really interesting mix. You find imported Roman, Hellenistic, and Indian goods right near those massive burial cairns in the hinterland. What does that tell us about their economy?
It gives us this concept of pastoral capitalism. It shows that trade wasn't just happening on the coast. The profits were being funneled directly into social status and power right there in the hinterland.
So, the herders, the pastoral elites, were the ones controlling the whole system.
Exactly. They controlled the caravan routes, they secured the supply lines from the interior, and they accumulated the wealth from international maritime trademark. The clan structure was the powerful economic backbone for the entire coast.
And to maintain that dominance, they had to be masters of the sea, which they were, with their own unique maritime technology, the beadin boat.
The beadin is a brilliant example of indigenous innovation. Unlike later dhows, which used iron nails, the beadin was a sewn plank boat. The planks were pierced and then literally sewn together with cord or fiber and then sealed with pitch.
Sewn together. That sounds almost, primitive, but you're saying its flexibility was actually a huge advantage over a rigid nailed ship.
That's the genius of it. In the heavy seas of the Indian Ocean monsoon, a rigid nailed hull can snap, but the sewn beadin hull was flexible. It could ride the swells, absorb tremendous pressure without cracking.
Yeah, they were robust.
Incredibly robust. Some were up to 23 meters long, capable of transoceanic voyages. It meant Somali mariners were primary actors sailing directly to Arabia and India. They weren't just relying on foreign ships.
And their success wasn't just about the boats. It was also about science. Right. Specifically, archaeoastronomy.
Correct. Their maritime success depended on a deep knowledge of star lore. Sailors used the rising and setting of specific stars not just for direction, but crucially, to estimate the seasonal shifts in the powerful monsoon winds.
Precision scheduling.
Absolutely vital. You had to time it perfectly to capitalize on the trade winds, ensure you arrived on time, and maximize your profits.
So, as we move into the medieval period, the region shows this incredible resilience by just seamlessly integrating into the Dar al-Islam. The speed of it is amazing. You can see it in the architecture of the Masjid al-Qiblatain in Zayla.
Yes. That mosque is often dated to the 7th century, almost immediately after the Hijra. And its defining feature is that it has the prayer niches.
Right? One facing Jerusalem and one facing Mecca.
Exactly. One is aligned toward Jerusalem, which was the earliest Qibla, and the later one is toward Mecca. It's physical proof that the community integrated and evolved right alongside the earliest Islamic networks.
And by the 10th century, this connectivity leads to powerful independent states like the Mogadishu Sultanate. What's the ultimate proof that this was a complex political entity, not just some trading post?
The clearest proof of its sovereignty is that Mogadishu minted its own coins with the names of local sultans on them. And these coins circulated widely. They've been found as far away as the Persian Gulf.
Which proves they had recognized political and economic autonomy.
Absolutely. And we have fantastic first-hand accounts of its complexity. The Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta visited in 1331.
What did he find?
He was blown away. He praised its prosperity, its dense population, its sophisticated coral stone architecture. But the most important detail he recorded was the formal trade protocol. Foreign merchants were assigned local agents or guarantors.
To manage transactions and disputes?
Yes, and to ensure tariffs were collected. This kind of institutionalized, regulated system points to serious state capacity and judicial control.
And beyond the Islamic world, these Somali centers were also deeply connected to East Asia. We're talking about relations with China that went on for centuries.
Yes? Chinese texts from the Tang dynasty already mentioned trade with the region. They called it Moulin Guo. But the absolute apex of the relationship was in the 15th century during the Ming voyages of Admiral Zheng He, his.
Massive fleets visited places like Mogadishu and Zayla.
They did, and that led to the famous giraffe diplomacy.
Right, the giraffes.
Somali envoys presented live giraffes to the main court. And this was an exceptionally savvy diplomatic move because the Chinese interpreted this exotic animal as the mythical Keelan, a symbol
Of good fortune and virtuous rule.
Precisely. It shows that the Somali rulers understood and played skillfully into the symbolism of the main court, confirming their status as sophisticated sovereign partners.
So finally, we have to talk about what is arguably the most resilient and unique Somali institution of all, the Xeer system. This customary law. It's a kind of order without a state.
Xeer is a decentralized, consensus-based legal system. It regulates relations between clans using the principle of collective responsibility, and it's all administered by elders, the Gurti.
So how does that work in practice?
Crucially, if a member of one clan commits an offense, say a homicide or a major theft, their entire lineage is held collectively responsible for paying compensation, usually in livestock, to the victim's lineage.
So if one person steals a camel, their whole family has to pay the debt back. How does that stabilize a whole society?
By making everyone accountable for everyone else. The threat of having your whole lineage held financially responsible for one person's actions, it prevents endless cycles of retaliation. It encourages internal policing and negotiated settlements.
It's a stateless stability.
It is. And it's the key to how long-distance caravan trade could remain viable for centuries, ensuring continuity even when the coastal sultanates rose and fell.
It's an institutional model that proved far more resilient than a big centralized empire. And holding this entire society together was this one piece of essential infrastructure, the Burkeed.
The Burkt. These cement-lined reservoirs were a critical hydraulic innovation. They were designed to capture and store rainwater from the seasonal floods.
So, a simple but vital technology.
Absolutely vital. This infrastructure linked the interior pastoral nodes, the people with the livestock, to the wealthy coastal markets. It ensured the whole commercial system could function reliably year after year.
So, what does this all mean when we put it all together? The final synthesis of our deep dive is pretty clear. Ancient Somali civilization was central, dynamic, and expansive.
They weren't peripheral footnotes. They were key interlocutors between Africa, Arabia, and Asia. Their history fundamentally challenges the silences of those old diffusionist models.
We see connectivity, resilience, and sovereignty across thousands of years.
From the deep indigenous foundations confirmed by genetics, to the defiance of the Macrobian king, the global reach of the Baden ships, all the way to the sophisticated governance of Mogadishu.
And the enduring legacy, which is maybe the most profound part, is that this high level of societal complexity and trade dominance was achieved without relying on monumental stone architecture or a centralized bureaucratic empire.
Their legacy is institutional, it's technological, and it's adaptive. The Xeer system, the Baden boat, the Burkeed reservoirs, it just proves that complexity doesn't always look like the historical models we're usually taught.
Which raises an important final question for you, the listener, to consider. What modern lessons can be drawn from the success of a system like Xeer, a governance model based on trust, collective responsibility, and consensus that maintains social and commercial order across vast, challenging territories for millennia? Something to mull over